send the earthquake in order to set Paul and Silas free. So why did God cause the earthquake? I think it suggests that the miracle that happens in that chapter certainly is not about freeing the evangelist from the Philippian prison, but it's about freeing the jailer and his family from the prison of sin. Because that's the outcome of the story. That's, of course, what happens. So how does Paul respond to the pardon from the Philippian magistrates? Look at verse 37. He says, "But Paul said to them, 'They have beaten us publicly, uncondemned men who are Roman citizens.'" Remember, both he and Silas are citizens of Rome. They had rights within the empire, and the way they had been treated the night before violated those rights. They've thrown us into prison, and now they throw us out secretly? No. Paul puts his foot down. You're not setting me free from this jail. I'm going to stay right here. Let them come themselves and take us out. So Bible scholar A.N. Triton wrote this about it. He said, Paul seems to have been responsible for the first recorded sit-in. He refused to move until the authorities came and apologized. He wanted to compel the authorities to recognize and to fulfill their God-appointed task. This may have been very important for the freedom of the church he left behind. So remember, Paul's planting a church and everywhere he goes. All of the cities we've looked at so far and will continue to look at in Acts, that's his goal. His goal is to win people to the Lord, to disciple them, and to see a new church established. So he does something very significant with this to establish the freedom that that church should have. Moving on to verse 38, the police reported these words to the magistrates, and they were afraid when they heard that they were Roman citizens. They had no idea. This was news to them. And now they realized they could be in trouble for this. So they came and apologized to them, and they took them out and asked them to leave the city. According to the next verse, it would seem that Paul and Silas do indeed accept their apology and realize that it's time to move on, that this matter was over. So let's look at verse 40 together. So they went out of the prison and visited Lydia, and when they had seen the brothers, they encouraged them and departed. Notice here that Luke has returned to writing in third person plural. And this will be the case until chapter 20. So what we think is probably happening here is that Paul and Silas leave Luke behind in Philippi. Not because they don't like him or he smelled bad or anything like that, but someone has to stay and help plant this new church. Someone has to begin the process of discipling all of these new converts that had been won over the last few weeks that they had been in Philippi. Starting now into chapter 17, let's continue with the story. We have two cities to look at this week. Acts chapter 17. Now, when they had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, and there was a synagogue of the Jews. And Paul went in and as was his custom, and on 3 Sabbath days he reasoned with them from the scriptures, explaining and proving that it was necessary for the Christ to suffer and to rise from the dead, and saying, "This Jesus whom I proclaim to you is the Christ." So for 3 weeks, this is his goal, his objective. He's going in to the synagogue on the Sabbath, and he's reasoning with the Jews that are present there.